Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to our event today, Health, Care, and Poetry, Unexpected Relationships. I'm Suzanne Del Gizzo, Professor of English and Chair of the Center for Integrated Humanities here at the college. The concept of integration in the name of the center, Integrated Humanities, is important to us because it captures our fundamental understanding that our fields, though distinct disciplines, form an intellectual whole, a disposition that comes down to a humanistic approach to the world, excuse me, an approach centered around human interests and values, and a belief in the goodness and ability of human beings. Sorry, I've lost my breath for some reason. Yeah, I'll take some water, thanks.
Sam already noticing, already looking.
I think it's just been a while since I've been in a room full of people like this. Anyway, I focus on the concept of integration today because we are reaching out beyond our center to show how our concerns can integrate with a field that might initially appear very different, nursing and health professions more broadly. This event is co-sponsored by the Health Humanities Minor, which I founded about 5 years ago, and the new nursing program at CHC, which is in the process of being founded by Susan Apold, who is one of our speakers here today. When Susan arrived on campus, I realized that I had not just a wonderful new colleague, but an ally. We shared the idea that healthcare clinicians and practitioners are not simply more compassionate, but actually more effective when they are rooted deeply in a humanistic tradition and education. I come to my interest in the health humanities as an English professor interested in the power of narrative, but also as the daughter of a man who practiced as a doctor, a GP, that's a sort of all-around doctor, for nearly 50 years. He came from an old school, or the old school of doctoring, where docs, as he likes to call them, sat with patients, visited their homes, and knew their families, all of which he believes added context to his sense of their health and his ability to diagnose and treat their illnesses. Toward the end of his career, he served as a chief medical officer of a hospital, where he lamented some of the changes he was seeing in medicine, connected mostly to how healthcare was increasingly seen as a business. Things like shorter patient visits dictated by insurance companies, and the growth of hospitalists, or doctors employed directly by hospitals, who know patients only as bodies in the bed in front of them. Luckily, his concerns are being countered by a burgeoning effort to recover humanism in the health professions, led by programs like Columbia School of Narrative Medicine, run by Rita Charan, a woman with an MD and a PhD in English. So there is hope. And it is in that spirit that we gather together to listen to a conversation between a poet and a clinician on the role of art and humanism in healthcare. A conversation enhanced by the fact that Susan and Lisa, who I'm about to introduce, were high school friends who found each other again through the magic of Facebook, and then went on to discover how their career paths intertwined in fascinating and complementary ways. So now let me introduce our speakers. Susan Apold is a registered nurse and a board-certified adult and geriatric nurse practitioner. She was born and raised in Philadelphia, spent most of her career in New York, and then recently moved back home to the Philly area. Called to start a nursing program at Chestnut Hill College, Dr. Apold is a passionate believer in the healing power of nursing. Her career spans many decades, and she was fortunate to have practiced nursing in a multitude of specializations: maternity, adult care, primary outpatient care, and nursing education. Dr. Abhold is a believer in the liberal arts as an essential foundation for the informed, safe, and compassionate practice of the healing arts, and most certainly nursing. As quoted on your booklets for this conversation this afternoon, she espouses Nightingale's belief that nursing is one of the fine arts, perhaps the finest of fine arts. She hopes today's conversation with her colleague Lisa DeVuono will bring together the necessary integration of fine arts, words, feelings, and clinical practice. Lisa DeVuono is a local poet raised in Philadelphia. In addition to her career as a medical librarian, she has led creativity and poetry workshops working with cancer patients, teens in recovery, and caregivers. She wrote a peer-based curriculum, Poetry as a Tool for Recovery, an easy-to-use guide in 8 sessions for facilitators working with persons living with mental health challenges. She produced a multimedia shows incorporating song, music, poetry, and dance in Rumi and Song at the Sedgwick Theater, and Whole Heart, Whole Home, and Breaking Open, Breaking Free, part of the Ice House Tonight series in Bethlehem. In addition to the full-length manuscript, This Time Roots, Next Time Wings, her poetry has appeared in Mad Poets Review, Patterson Literary Review, and the anthology Grit, Gravity, and Grace, New Poems About Medicine and Healthcare. She is the author of the chapbook Poems from the Playground of Risk, published by Pudding House Press, and was the recipient of an honorable mention in Passaic County Community College's annual Allen Ginsberg contest. So please help me in welcoming Lisa and Susan.
So it's wonderful to be here, and I'm going to jump right in and read you a poem which you can follow along in your booklet. It's the first poem right after the quotes about poetry and nursing. And as I read this poem, what I'd like you to do is notice which lines you have a reaction to. Could be positive reaction, could be a challenging reaction, could be curiosity. Just kind of notice what you're reacting to. Valentine for Earnest Man by Naomi Shihab Nye. You can't order a poem like you order a taco. Walk up to the counter, say, "I'll take 2," and expect it to be handed back to you on a shiny plate. Still, I like your spirit. Anyone who says, "Here's my address, write me a poem," deserves something in reply. So I'll tell you a secret instead. Poems hide. In the bottoms of our shoes, they are sleeping. They are the shadows drifting across our ceilings the moment before we wake up. What we have to do is live in a way that lets us find them. Once I knew a man who gave his wife 2 skunks for a Valentine. He couldn't understand why she was crying. I thought they had such beautiful eyes. And he was serious. He was a serious man who lived in a serious way. Nothing was ugly just because the world said so. He really liked those skunks, so he reinvented them as Valentines, and they became beautiful, at least to him. And the poems that had been hiding in the eyes of skunks for centuries crawled out and curled up at his feet. Maybe if we reinvent whatever our lives give us, we find poems. Check your garage. the odd sock in your drawer, that person you almost like, but not quite, and let me know. So, just gonna popcorn out, just shout out any line that really stuck with you, that you raised an eyebrow, or you thought, oh, I'm curious about this. Don't be shy. Bottoms of the shoes? Okay.
Oh, bottoms of our shoes.
Okay. Who else?
The poems that had been hiding in the eyes of skunks for centuries.
Nothing was ugly because the world said so.
He couldn't understand why she was crying.
Any others? Anybody at this table? Come on, be brave. Be brave. Be like skunks. Come on.
I like the eyes of skunks.
Okay.
I'm not sure about other things.
Okay. Yeah.
Having lived with one outside my window.
Anyone else? Anybody else? Okay.
So why would we do this? I'm a nurse. I have a great deal more comfort with starting IVs on every one of you in this room than I have with talking about poetry. I'm not a poet. But I do know that poems do live on the bottoms of my shoes. And I do know that they are out there in the experiences of the men and women I have taken care of over the last, I'm going to say it out loud, and then I'm going to need to pause for a minute. 45 years I've been a nurse, and I've been taking care of patients. There are a couple of things here. Nursing literature tells us that it is our job, we're a little grandiose in nursing. Our job, there's a nurse over here who can understand this. Our job as nurses, we are told by our researchers and everybody else, our job is to heal, to care, to do so with open arms, regardless of who we're caring for, because folks are human. That's it. That's all we need to know. Like the beautiful eyes of skunks. They're human, and so that is my obligation. We're fraught with obligation in nursing. And we are supposed to understand, ready? The psychological and existential core of the patients we serve so that we can serve them better. That's great, but I'm a human being, and I have a lot to do in the course of a day, and I think it's a tall order to understand the psychological and existential core of the patients that I serve so that I can serve them better. That's a lot. And in nursing, we kind of have been doing that, Do it, do it, do it. Start the IV, give the shot, give the med, do it, do it, do it. And we have some problems in 21st century healthcare. Suzanne identified some of them, some of the changes. But I am a nurse, and so I'll talk about the problems that kind of approach to care have created. And some of this information is post-pandemic, so we have to keep that in mind. But here we go. There are 4 million registered nurses in the United States of America. 52% of them, 52%, have articulated post-pandemic their desire to leave the profession. And that desire stems from compassion fatigue, burnout, and an inability to find an outlet or a voice for the pleasure and burden of finding the existential and psychological core in every human being, going there and taking care of them. So we're here today because of that. Because while I can give great voice and conversation to why this is important for our patients, what I would like to talk about among us all is how we can step back and use words in the way that Lisa uses them to find the existential and psychological core of us For me, that's nurses, and will be the students that Chestnut Hill College will serve over the next few years, so that they understand or begin to understand, because I've been practicing 45 years, I don't know if I've found my existential core, but they could begin to understand and to cope, if you will, and to identify strategies so that they can take care of themselves. Because you cannot take care of another human being. And everybody, I'm looking here, everybody here knows that because you've all taken care of somebody. You cannot take care of another human being unless you take care of yourself. So, poems are found on the bottom of shoes. I have 45 years of stories that I never told anybody. Well, I tell people from time to time. But they're in my heart, and I was introduced to the poem that Lisa read, so I'm going to give you two instances of experiences that I have had in nursing that I think are worthy of a poem, but I am not a poet, so I am going to hand them to Lisa and order them up like tacos. And I expect a return on my investment because Lisa is, so all those years we did not, just because life happens, all those years we really didn't circle in one another's orbit. The backstory is we went to St. Martin of Tours as, we probably knew one another since we were 6, probably. We went to St. Martin of Tours, we lived in St. Martin of Tours Parish, we went to Little Flower High School, we were compadres, nerdy girls, nerdy serious girls with glasses and all those kind of things. And I was editor of the Literary Garland, and Lisa was the associate editor of Literary
Associate
Garland.
editor.
And Lisa's use of words and language, even when she was 15 or 16 or 17, humbled me, which is why I'm having her do my poems. So, where are the bottoms of shoes in my career? I was working at Frankfurt Tarsdale. It's not called that anymore, right? It is called that. Okay, working at a hospital called Frankfurt that was in Tarsdale, up by Holy Family University. And I was working in obstetrics. Joyful place, unbelievably joyful place. And I remember, it's a very long time ago, I'm sure that young man is 40 by now, but husband and wife came in, it was like out of a TV show. It was so beautiful. It was her third child, their third child. They were so excited. And they were doing natural childbirth, which everybody does now, but they didn't so much then. And her name was Joy. Mom's name was Joy. I can't remember Dad's name, but Mom's name was Joy. And they were wonderful and conversant, and they had 2 little girls at home, and both of them, Mom and Dad, were committed. They didn't care about the gender of this baby, and didn't know, because we weren't doing ultrasounds every 15 minutes back in the day. They didn't care about the gender of this baby. They loved it already. It was part of their family. And they wanted a healthy baby. And you could, just talking to these folks, I don't know about their existential core, but I was sure then, and I'm sure now, that there was beauty and joy in this moment for them. They didn't care. Dad didn't care. Mom didn't care. Out pops a little baby boy. And the very first thing that little baby boy did was urinate. And his stream of urine was so forceful and so wonderful that it shot his dad right in the eye. And Dad, who didn't care about the baby's gender, started to cry. And he kept saying, "Joy, Joy, look at him, look at it, look at what he's doing." And in that moment, I knew they cared, and they loved this little guy. And it was a moment of joy in that delivery room. And I didn't forget it, because it was a very long time ago. And it was the best of those experiences. So I think that's a poem maybe on my right foot. A sadder experience was when I was 22 years old. A young man who was 22 years old died of testicular cancer. You don't die of testicular cancer anymore. It's curable, 100% curable. Isn't that a piece of joy? And we knew he was suffering, and we knew he was going to die. And it was 7 o'clock in the morning, and we were in report. And we heard a wail of agony. a wail of suffering. Because we deeply appreciated the family's need to be with this young man, and his mother had walked into his room at 7 a.m. and found him dead. There's a poem there on the bottom of my other shoe. She fainted on me. This isn't funny, but I remember it. I was wearing clogs, and because she fainted on top of me, my shoes fell off. So there's some poem in there too. My shoes flying across the room. But nothing prepared me for either one of those experiences. Nothing. I was a 22-year-old girl who witnessed the death of a 22-year-old boy, and the prevailing thinking of the time was, suck it up, buttercup, there's a patient in the next room, keep on moving. I have always been devoted to the liberal arts. I went to a liberal arts college. I believe that reflection and use of words, because I love words, not in a way perhaps that Lisa does, but I love words, is one of the keys to finding your existential and psychological core. And it is my great hope, and indeed part of the application I'm sending up to Harrisburg tomorrow, that at Chestnut Hill College, we authentically and intentionally infuse humanities wherever we find them and however we find them, poetry, literature, history, philosophy, theology, whatever. Infuse that into the curriculum so that we're infusing that into the men and women who will be taking care of us one fine day, so that they can learn to develop resilience, because it takes a resilient person just to live life, but particularly in that field, so that they can identify a strategy for coping that they may not have thought of, and so that they can deliver the kind of care that we deserve, particularly as your dad identified, in a world where that is becoming increasingly less available to us, and that we can proudly hold up our heads and say, you know why those nurses are as good as they are? They're as good as they are, and as special as they are, and as elite as they are, because they went to Chestnut Hill College, and their faculty and staff knew how to write a poem. So that's my piece.
So my trajectory in life was a little bit different. As a young person, I was really drawn to libraries and to reading. And I had some trauma as a young child. And one of the ways that I discovered that I could make sense of that trauma was to begin to write my own story. And one way I did that was to begin to notice all the things around me that were uplifting, that could hoist me up. And so I was, I think, in the 4th grade when I started writing very simple rhymes. And then I went to the library and discovered a whole world of poets, right? And this is back in the time when we didn't have devices, but there were copy machines. So I took books out of the library and just copied poems. And so in a sense, I was kind of creating my own sense of scripture, my own sort of prayer book of things that I could return to, things that resonated with me. Maybe things I didn't quite understand, but that I wanted to heighten my sense of curiosity. So I started to think, well, what am I going to do with this? You know, I had to get a job as I graduated from school. And so my path was a little bit more circuitous. It wasn't a straight path as maybe Susan's was. But one of the things I had to do was to be willing to see the opportunities as they came up in my life, was to be really open and to kind of get out of my own comfort zone, right? I grew up in Northeast Philly. I was raised Catholic. I was the daughter of first generation. I was a first generation. My parents were immigrants. Many of us can relate to that. And so, you know, there was one way to do things. And so for me, I wanted to branch out. And so poetry became a way in which I could find that path. And so, but libraries were always interesting to me because I felt safe there. And so I went to library school, got a degree, and my first job was in a nursing college, Newman College. I think it's Newman University now. And I thought about, wow, this could be an opportunity to kind of focus my interest in librarianship and providing information and resources to people with health and wellness. And I think the thing that really solidified was that this was in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. For those of us who were around then and serving, it was during the AIDS epidemic. And I met someone who was the head of the AIDS Information Center, John Kelly. And I had him come to Newman College to speak about his experiences and to speak about how we could be of service to people during an epidemic. And his experience really kind of solidified that that was the path for me, was to begin to use my degree of providing information with service, with community. And so I became a lay chaplain for a year, working at Jefferson in hospice, in the OR, and that even deepened my experience. So how did poems come into that? Well, you know, when you go into a room, when you get that phone call in the middle of the night when you're on call as a chaplain, and someone says, I want you to come in and sit by the bedside and be a presence. My mother is passing. My father is having difficulty. Other chaplains would reach for their Bibles or I would reach for poems, because those were the scripture, those were the words that I could provide for comfort for other people. And then later on, my own health challenges and then taking care of my mother deepened my commitment to seeing how a poem could be a source for healing. How do we use a poem and flip it to become a way in? And so how is a poetry a tool for wellness? Anybody have any ideas? Just raise your hand. How might a poem be used as a tool for wellness? No. As a tool for wellness. How might a poem be used? Yeah. Wait, let me bring you the mic.
As a method to express yourself?
So as a method to express yourself, to find a voice. I saw another hand over here. Yeah.
Some people here know about 5 years ago I had cancer, and that Christmas, every morning, Christmas break or winter break, I got up and I read a poem. And there was another faculty member here in chemistry and I said, I read a poem every morning because I have cancer. And she said, that would not be how I would cope with cancer. But it was how I did. And one line I remember, it was a woman teaching these little kids, and they're coloring, and they're supposed to think of the skylark, Shelley's skylark. And she said, because I wanted them to know that life was not artifact, but aperture. And I just put the book down and said, that's it. Life opens up. It has openings. So, I mean, I lived, so I guess it helped.
Terrific. That's a perfect example. So one of the ways in which poems do that is they use language, they use tone, they use music, they use rhythm, they use metaphor. These are all literary devices, but we don't speak that way in normal life. And so we have to slow down. We have to slow down when we read a poem, right? We have to stop. We have to pause and say, well, I wonder what that's about. Oh, I'm kind of curious about that. So right away we're listening. We're listening in a completely different way, right? And so this relates to healthcare, because when we encounter someone in our profession, we might be busy, we might be doing this, where's the plug, what's this? But if we stop for a moment with a poem, we have to sit, we have to go deeper. We develop a skill set that's deepening our ability to listen for things that may not be obvious, right? On a first read of a poem, there's lots of things we don't really understand, but if we read it 2 or 3 times and slow down, we begin to hear things. We begin to find a way to be compassionate. The other way that poetry is a tool for wellness is that it's part of all of the other sort of therapeutic humanities, like art therapy, music therapy, drama therapy, right? And what does that do? It doesn't focus on the illness. It focuses on the whole person. So I may have cancer, but I am not just defined by my cancer. I might have some other illness or some other struggle, mental health challenges. When we engage in poem and poem making, we're shifting the conversation. We're not about our illness. We're about the whole person. So right away, we're using imaginative language, we're listening, and we're focusing on the person's whole being. And so I think that directly relates to what Susan was saying earlier about how do we introduce these concepts into the curriculum in a way that makes us better listeners, better nurses, better doctors, just better people. I mean, that's really what it's about, right?
Recently, in my quest for healthcare for myself, since I just moved down from New York, Suzanne, you'll understand this, and maybe you all will. It's new to me. I went to a primary care provider, and I wasn't really permitted to speak to anybody. I had to be registered using a QR code. And the QR code and I did not have any relationship, except that I was angry that that was my introduction into something as intimate and personal as my healthcare. So, Barbara, what a wonderful way to cope. And that's, I said it before, but those are the kinds of things that I would like students and all of us to know that help us slow down and help us understand, help us get, I think it's funny, the existential core of every patient. Help us to get there and to find that. And Lisa, you said something really, really important. And I don't think I'm telling anybody in this room anything that you don't know. When we are interacting with one another, probably all the time, but we're talking about health, it is incumbent upon us to slow down. Because you cannot both listen and give care and talk fast and move quickly at the same time. It doesn't work.
Well, I think oftentimes we already think we know the answer to the next thing. And that's not really deep listening, right? Because I think it's oftentimes a way in which we want to look like we're doing something. And the truth is that there's a lot of things in life we don't have a say about. Things happen in life. But we might have a say about how we cope with it. And so when I think about my toolkit, I think of poems and poem making and having a voice, giving expression as part of that toolkit. I'd like to read a poem now. And then I think, Susan, did you want to say something else about it before we move into the activity? Yeah, okay. So I think what I'd like to do is read a poem, and you can certainly follow along in the booklet. And I just wanted to say about the booklet I prepared for you today. These are all poems that I have used in many different workshops and working with cancer patients and working with ALS and with people living with mental health challenges. And the reason I selected these particular poems is because, not necessarily because they're technically the best poems, but because they offer a lot of space and a lot of entry and access for the reader to find themselves in the poem and to develop a skill for listening to the things that they may not be able to relate to. It develops some empathy. So I'm going to read the poem that I wrote called Prescription, if I can find it. So this is a poem I wrote. I was a caregiver for my mother for many years. And I think that some of you can probably relate to this. Prescription. When the movers come to clear your furniture, I sweep up cobwebs and dust bunnies. I'm going to stop. It's after domestic life, nurse, and poet, towards the end, okay? Prescription. When the movers come to clear your furniture, I sweep up cobwebs and dust bunnies. Finding a lone pill on the floor, I panic. Which of the 1,000 days did we miss? Did this mistake, among all the ones we would come to make in those days, signal the turning point? Oh, lorazepam, metformin, niacin, synthroid, and Lipitor. Which one is the lost puzzle piece that sent you slipping into the prismatic life of dementia? Memories collide with every lift of my broom. Buying your meds, paying the bills, tracking appointments, bottles crowding kitchen cabinets and countertops, a pharmacy of vials, needles, pressure cuff. Eventually, I found what I didn't know I was looking for, the Cadillac of pill dispensers. The carousel, the lucky wheel, 31 days and 4 time slots, easy to flip lids and boxes big enough to hold a constellation of shape and size, a sliding out rhythm, a sing-song carnival music. When we sorted the pills, I gave you the most colorful large ones, the easier to see, harder to roll from your hands. This carousel was an advent calendar leading to your Christmas birthday. If only there had been a different kind of surprise behind each of the doors, a piece of chocolate, a candied fruit, or a lucky charm. To reverse all this, to be like children on Halloween night when we dumped everything onto the floor, deciding together what stays, what gets thrown away. So I read you that poem because it has a couple elements in it. It describes the situation, me caregiving for my mother. It then introduces some humor, right, by finding this Cadillac pill dispenser, right? And then at the end, it tries to reframe a difficult situation to bring in a memory that I shared with my mother. And so this is how poetry can be a tool for wellness, kind of leading us down that way. So, yeah, okay. So I can't believe that we are at 3:40 already. So I wanted to introduce the writing activity, but do you want to say something else now?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So Susan has, there are 2 prompts. Yeah, talk about your prompt. There are 2 prompts in our booklet, and they're at the back of the page. And I think I've already said that there's a tray of wonderful metaphorical things in your table: stones, papers, threads. And so there are 2 prompts in the booklet. One is about rocks, papers, and threads, where you can begin to put down some ideas for crafting a poem. And so when we think about rocks, I also, again, think about nursing, right? Because when I think about the rocks, I think about what's strong, what's a foundation, what's immovable, right? When I think about paper, I think about vulnerability. I also think about communication. We use paper to communicate. And thirdly, I think about the threads, the things that are woven into our lives, the things that connect us, the ways in which we, make community. So if you haven't already selected a rock or a stone, a piece of paper, and a thread, please do so. Those are yours to keep. And if you don't want to do that prompt, there's a second prompt, which Susan's going to introduce.
So I had the great good fortune of participating in a program called the Robert Wood Johnson Executive Nurse Fellows Program. I was a fellow with Robert Wood Johnson. I don't know if you heard of them or not. Johnson & Johnson, everybody heard of them. And this was a learning experience. Kind of that experience really influenced my desire to teach nursing students in a different way and to use different modalities to do that. And every time we went to wonderful places, Colorado Springs and North Carolina, and every time we went, our faculty had some surprise for how we were supposed to learn. And I hated this. I can't tell you how much I hated this. I loved the experience being an RWJ fellow, but so we got there one day, and a nurse, educator, stands up and tells us we're going to write a poem. Well, I can do a teenage eye roll along with the best of them. And I thought, yeah, right, lady, I'm going to write a poem. But it wasn't optional. Nothing that we did there was optional. You're going to write a poem. And there were 20 of us, And I think everybody, we were nurses and we were executives and educators and deans. We were above writing poetry. And probably because we had no idea how to go about doing such a thing. So the notion that RWJ used in educating us was that it was very well planned, and it was divided up. And the first thing they told us was, you cannot lead, and you cannot be a good nurse, it's pretty much what I said earlier, unless you know yourself. And the notion was, you start that process by figuring out where you're from. What made you you? What makes you you? And so we were all sent off to a wonderful room in the hotel where, I think this was helpful, lots and lots of booze was in that room. And we all had to write a poem called Where I Am From. And we started out rolling our eyes and thinking we were far too good for something like that, and ended up weeping, thinking about where I am from. So you have a prompt, it's the last page of your booklet, that talks about how to go about doing that. We did it from our souls, pretty much. We didn't have prompts. But I wrote a poem that I'm going to read to you. And this took great courage because I tossed and turned about it till 3 o'clock in the morning. And I told Lisa I was going to do it. And at 3 a.m. I decided, Lisa is not the boss of me, and I don't have to write a poem. And even if I write it, I don't have to read it. But I'm a proud daughter of the Catholic tradition. We went to Little Flower together. There was no way I was gonna not write the poem. All right, so here goes, where I am from. It's not good, all right? So forgive me, all right? So where I am from. I am from Anne and Rudy, Apollonia and Sepp, Anna and Howard. Pratt Street, 930, the wooden white numbers hung with pride and joy of row home ownership. The N bus running down the street to Frankfurt Avenue in the snow. And we heard the chink, chink, chink of chains on snow tires, and awakened knowing we didn't have to go to school that day. St. Martin of Tours, Johnny, Bobby, Dennis, Gregory, the only girl on the block, the World War II nurse, because there were no women fighting wars. Beloved oldest girl, first everything. First child, first grandchild, first little one, showered and nurtured and wrapped in the arms of an immigrant family who saw their work and dreams in a little face. Yes, you, our darling girl, you are our dream for the future. You are why we came here. You are why we are here. The future is yours because we brought it to you. But remember, to whom much is given, much is expected. Give, daughter. Serve with humility those who cannot serve themselves. You are one of us, and that is who we are. We will be true. The most education anyone ever had in our families. Remember, to whom much is given, much is expected. Pay back the privilege. Give, heal, use the intellect that God gave you. Serve. That is where I'm from.
Okay, so this is the time where we're going to let you do a little writing. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't have to be finished. It doesn't have to be polished. There are no shoulds here. We're just, pick a rock, pick a piece of paper, pick a thread, or do the exercise that Susan just mentioned, and just put some thoughts down, okay? And there should be pens, and there should be paper. You can also flip over the booklet and write on the back of that. Just put a few things down, okay? And if you don't want to write about any of that, write about whatever you want, okay? There are no shoulds. So we'll do that for about 8 minutes or so, okay? Okay, so you should maybe put whatever finishing or non-finishing touches onto your piece. It's the beginning of something. And so we have a couple options here. You could turn to a person next to you or to 2 other people and share, or you could share in the large group if you're brave enough to do that. or share something. And I see, is that a shrug? Is that a yes? What's that? You can do the group? Okay, all right. So why don't you turn to, the group and share what you've written, and is that a command? It's an invitation. Oh, do you have to leave for a meeting? Is that what you? Okay. It's an invitation, if you would like to.
I am from a little white house, inhabited by a little white mouse. This little white mouse had the cutest snout. He'd use the snout to find his way in and out. Every morning, I'd leave him some cheese. Using his snout, he'd find it with ease. He wags his tail and woofs down the prize. I know he loves me, it's clear in his eyes. Days, weeks, months, and years have passed. In our hearts, both of us wish this would last. Then one day, I set out his cheese. I did it with love, for him to please. I waited to see his cute little snout, but day after day, he didn't come out. I remained and lived in this little white house, but it was never the same without my little white mouse.
Bravo, give him a hand. It's amazing what you can do in 8 minutes. Yeah. Okay, who else? Who else wants to be brave? I see some writing here. Bravery, bravery, bravery. Think about it. Bravery at this table. I see some writing. Yes, please.
I didn't follow the format for this, but I did write something.
Oh.
Yeah.
Opens up, and we can really hear you, and read slower than you think and hold the microphone.
Okay. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes. Just
all right.
Slow down.
The sound of nothing, comforting, warm, and alone. A sound full of emptiness, filled by constant chatter, at charging challenges and fear. Nothing but constant racing thoughts, unending, ever curious. How did you do that on that assessment? Remember that one time you forgot your 3rd grade homework? How large is the earth? When you die, will it be worth it? Is everything you've done worth the trouble? Tomorrow's Tuesday, right? Chit-chat to the fading consciousness embraces the white noise, only to wake up refreshed for the day.
Okay. How about anyone else at this table? Oh, come on. She's sending over there? Yeah? Okay. Very good. Really project.
Okay, thank you. I hold the whole world in my hands, a stone from all the mountains of the earth, rick-rack from all the undulating waves in oceans, rivers, seas, and brooks, paper from the land, arid deserts, and fertile farms. I thank God who holds me in his hands as I hold the world.
Would you like to? No? You're feeling shy? You're going to do it? Let's go. Give me an S. Give me a U.
Okay, so this has an immediate reality that my daughter's school, I stepped out, they had a lockdown. I was like, what? And I had to run out. They're fine, she's fine, but she missed her bus. So this is a little bit of background to my poem called Absence. I'm having trouble paying attention to what my husband is saying about his work over dinner. Trouble answering my daughter's request to select a metaphor to describe her. Pressed, I stole one her grandfather used when she was 3 and tell her, "You are a ballet." Trouble finding time to drop by to help my sister, who threw out her back and is laying on her couch in the one comfortable position she can find. And all this troubles me. I detest the word busy, promised to ban it from my vocabulary. Squirrel. Squirrel. It's from the movie, if you guys done in the movie Up, the dog he's like always like trying to pay attention and then he goes, squirrel.
Exactly. We have a lot of squirrels in our life, right? They're always darting in and out of our landscape. Did you want to read yours? No? Anyone else?
I just don't think Suzanne will really banish the word busy from her.
So, if you don't want to read what you wrote, is there anyone willing to sort of share maybe one insight about poems in this particular way, or something that, in the booklet, or something that made you think differently about it? Anybody at all? Yeah.
I found it opened up the vulnerability in me. The way you read, you were led to tears at one point, and it just went very deep inside of me, and the whole thing of slowing down, being still, which I am not good at, but as I'm aging and becoming more vulnerable health-wise, that's the good part. I don't have a choice. Well, I do have a choice, but I'm embracing it, and I thank you.
Thanks for coming. Anybody else have anything? Thank you. No, it's okay. I understand. Anybody else have anything they want to read or share? No? Yeah.
So, how did we do in terms of articulating the nexus between humanities, poetry in particular, and healthcare? Just how did we do? I'm asking for feedback. I would like you to tell me, how did we do?
I think you did well.
Okay.
For sure.
Made sense to everybody? Joe, you want to say something?
Well, I think it was really good because, in these days of healthcare, it's so impersonal.
Yeah.
Just to you can't even see anything. You have to type in online all this information, or you have to take prompts on the phone.
Right.
You never speak to a human being, so I think something has to change.
So maybe in our little corner of the universe here at Chestnut Hill College, maybe we can start to make a difference. Or maybe we can really change the whole world. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and I think, Suzanne, we full circle back to what you shared in the beginning about medical humanities and health humanities and starting this nursing, is introducing some of these concepts into the program at the ground level, and so that people begin to sort of understand that it's not something separate. It's an integrated process. It's not an elective. It's part of the growth and development of health professionals in nursing and the way in which we will care for the next generation, really. I mean, we're really talking about the next generation, turning over our beloved planet to them, and in the hopes that they'll be able to have skill set to be able to do that. So thanks so much. Yeah, Suzanne, go ahead.
First of all, I just wanted to thank both of you for your generosity and your time and putting together such a beautiful presentation. But the other thing I just wanted to call out in terms of the connection between healthcare and humanities is there is a phrase that they use, an attending physician, and attentiveness is at the core of, I think, really good healthcare. And there's a beautiful TED Talk that I'm going to push right now by Rita Charon, Charon, and she talks about being the doctor to a woman who had breast cancer. And then after she was cured, she was terrified that the breast cancer would return, just terrified. And she would check and come in for checkups all the time. Is this a lump? Is this a lump? I mean, all the time. And finally, Rita sat down with her and just said, I don't know if you're going to get your cancer again, but I'm going to be here with you every step of the way and every time you need me until you feel comfortable again. And I always just think that that's, I think what we're saying is about attending, walking next to other people. And the industry of medicine right now is making that really hard for doctors and nurses to do. So I just think we just have to keep doing what we're doing and pushing back. So thank you again so much. And thanks to all of you for being here.
For being willing to participate in kind of these off-the-wall activities. And thanks for your voice.